We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years, since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the Darkened Hour.
Welcome to the Darkened Hour. I'm your host, Adam Fitzgerald. And with me today is a very special guest and somebody who I should have interviewed a long time ago, but I think at this moment in time, just right near or right after the September 11th attacks, he's the perfect person to interview. Somebody who I absolutely respect and I consider probably the most informative, most knowledgeable person on the subject I've ever come across. His name is Nelson Martins. He also goes by the name DJ Thermal Detonator, which is a character from Star Wars. He's also a director of many full-length films, including 6 on 77, the Dulles Airport cover-up, Explosives on George Washington Bridge, Truth or Fiction, World Trade Center bombing of 1993, Hidden Path to 9/11, probably my favorite of them all, not because I was partially narrating it, but because of the amount of information from there. And of course, Inconvenient 9/11 Truth and the thwarted hijackings of 9/11 and 9/13. He runs a blog as well, 9/11 Skeptics versus Truth. And he was also an original member of WACLA from 2008, and he was also one of its final organizers on there. Historian, analyzer, Nelson Martins, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction, Adam.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, this is going to be a fluid conversation because you're probably the only person that I know that knows about the information regarding a lot of these subjects that are linked to 9/11 and can expound on these subjects. But we'll keep it simple right off the bat. Why September 11, 2001? What gave you the motivation or general interest in the subject, and when?
You know, it was kind of hard. It's kind of hard to tell because it's like, you know, I watched the news just like everyone else did. You know, I watched the first day, but I wasn't stuck at home. I was moving around a bit. But you know, when I finally got around to seeing the buildings come down and just everything in shock in LA, just kind of like nobody was driving for a while. And, you know, the following day itself, just, you know, seeing all the people looking for their loved ones, you know, just the grieving factor that you just knew those people weren't going to find, you know, just getting emotionally attached just like everyone else did. But, you know, I didn't get to pay attention to too much of the news also afterwards because I had a lot of things going on. I was in a transition of getting a new job at Amoeba Music and, you know, moving to LA. And, you know, I just kind of, you know, saw, you know, I just paid attention to everything. I knew things weren't making sense when we were talking about going into Iraq in 2002. And, you know, I had a few people kind of like, you know, there were, you know, even like a landlord of mine in Hollywood who was, you know, his name was Jay, and he was pointing out, you know, all these theories about the oil, you know, that, you know, the Iraq's had all this oil forever, you know. So I saw things pretty much from there, but, you know, I would say by 2004, you know, Fahrenheit 9/11 probably, Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 probably, you know, got me really pissed off just to kind of pay attention to what was going on because of seeing what's at hand and all the things that were put in place with the Patriot Act. So I had a little bit of concern, about, our liberties and our freedoms, obviously, and even for myself, as a DJ and somebody who was a booking artist, it became a hard thing with people traveling in for foreigners coming into the country because you were having all these problems with getting a work visa to perform or entertain. And we had even there were tours canceled with certain people since the Patriot Act was put into place because there were dark people, people into dark culture in Europe, and they're traveling over and they're just getting profiled by the TSA, so on. And I saw all that affecting us greatly. But by the time I lost my job in 2007, there came the film Loose Change, and the second edition, the second version of the film. There I just became pissed off. I mean, I was just angry. The most angriest part I was upset was what I thought happened with the World Trade Center. Not so much of everything else with the planes. I was still kind of up in the air, but of course I entertained some of these, no hijack or no plane theories, particularly with the Pentagon.
Right.
But from there, I got upset, and when I got being into 9/11, still to do something about, from what I've seen in these films, because even Zeitgeist, the first one also, by 2008, or I would say maybe even late 2007 when I discovered Ron Paul, and then the campaign trail in 2008, I got kind of involved with that. To try to network and meet other conspiracy theorists that that had interest with 9/11. Even though I wasn't looking for the actual people who just conspiracy theorists, I was looking for people that I knew there had to be people like that.
Right.
Then eventually I came across Alex Jones, and when Ron Paul's election pretty much ended, I just started following that. I started following Alex Jones regularly. I mean, there were probably even 1 year I probably didn't even miss a show.
Right.
I was listening to talk radio a lot. I was listening to GCN. So I thought I was doing my 9/11 research by that. Aside really reading into other blogs, really even reading the commission report. Which is something not even truthers even do anyways. But I didn't bother. Other than film collecting, that was the thing. I was definitely looking for the hard copies on DVDs. I wasn't really good on the computer. I couldn't. I didn't really download. I never did torrents. I never did any of that stuff. At the same time, we're seeing the YouTube age start. There's Google videos, the dominant one at first, and then until Google ends up buying YouTube, and then all that kind of happens. But to becoming a researcher or a filmmaker, at least, because I was doing films before I was ever writing. I think by the time I started to see these stuff with the dancing Israelis, and then spending some time researching Israel, researching even Judaism, that's when I was just like, man, something's going on here. We're being BS, because I mean I was definitely at odds with all these all these fantastical theories of the U.S. government doing it alone, and that there weren't going to be no hijackers or Arabs involved. So eventually I ran into Ryan Dawson's films. I think I ran into Ryan Dawson, actually, his films in 2010, but I was already friended with him on MySpace for some reason, because back during then, before everyone moved on to Facebook, I added a lot of the, all the prominent 9/11 truth researchers groups, anything that was on MySpace then. So I already had Dawson on there, ironically, but I didn't even know he was a researcher. Then I noticed his other separate profile for antineocons.com. So when I came across War by Deception, and especially seeing all those reports with the George Washington Bridge and all that, I became even more pissed because, you know, he obviously puts it in there as another Israeli moving vehicle. Well, long story short, you know, I saw what he did with his film. I didn't like what he did with it because, you know, there was a lot of other good films to sample from, and the production quality wasn't that great. So I decided to sample and experiment with his good parts of his films and mix it in with some of the proper documentaries that were already out there. And that's what became An Inconvenient 9/11 Truth, the film, which is the first film I did, and I've done 3 or 4 versions of it. But, you know, over time, you know, still in doubt, still on the fence, I would say, with the hijacker thing. When I did Inconvenient 9/11 Truth, I didn't address I didn't address Flight 77 or the Pentagon. I was going to originally save that for later, for the third part of the film, after I got past the 1993 bombing, which I started to do really good research on, thanks to Michael Collins Piper. Then I started, by 2015, I started reading his books and all that. But then where Dawson really, changed the tune for me, and really where I realized that I needed to really make a position about the, you know, about the hijackings, is when he told me about Flight 93 and Shanksville, crash over Pennsylvania, and noticing the anomalies with the phone calls stating that there were 3 hijackers, knives, bombs. One of the calls even says dark-skinned males. And then with the transponder basically detailing that the person, the hijacking pilot who took over, was going by the name of Saeed, which would have been Saeed al-Ghamdi, not Zayed al-Jar, the Lebanese, while the other 3 were Saudi Arabian out of the 4 pilots for that plane. Then when having to discover that Zayed Jar, the Lebanese hijacker, had a cousin who was a 25-year-long Mossad spy, you know, it made you kind of realize, well, you know, was this guy really on the plane? Because, you know, especially if he had that much Western intel, you know, background, you know, could he have committed pseudocide? Not suicide, but pseudocide. Yeah. Then I start, you know, then you start to realize that, you know, all these phone calls, everything is real. It's not this swap over theories. It's not any of that. So, you know, the idea that the planes were, you know, landed at a different, you know, base, and, you know. So by that time, when I just started to discover this is when I started to write. Right. This is where I could say I really started to get into 9/11. Really, I mean, yeah, you're talking 7 or 8 year period of just being the street activist truther who's just passing out information that you think, you know, the research is being done. No. Now I started to do the research when Ed Brotherton told me, look, start a WordPress blog, you know, start writing, you know, what else has been missing and not being talked about. And I did. And, you know, that's in combination of making new films, you know, yeah, I've started to write more articles, and I've been an actual independent investigator looking at anomalies, you know, looking at the official story is a bigger cover up than just looking at the Twin Towers coming down. You know, it was a huge operation. It is huge. And, you know, and I worry about such a thing happening again, even if it's generations down the line, right. You know. But, you know, that's my road, how I got into 9/11.
That's basically almost similar to my ascension into the subject, but you've had a lot more experience behind you, and what makes it more valuable is that you were actually on the other side of the fence, so to speak, in regards to the truth movement. You met many prominent truthers out west. In fact, you were actually commiserating with members of the CIT team. That's Aldo Marquis and Craig Rankin. And you and could you just expound on that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I mean, as far as prominent researchers, I mean, I know Richard Gage. He knows me. I've been over his house twice when he lived in Northern California. Right. You know, I was helping to you know, promote the DVD at the time, you know, or all the flyers and the brochures and stuff. you know, and, you know, they even had one time invited me to be more on their team as far as even just to do, you know, regular, you know, work with the company, but you know, I wasn't really interested. I thought, you know, the local chapter of We Are Change LA, WACLA, you know, I thought that was important because there just need to be other things that needed to be addressed. And, you know, I thought it was more functional, more that I had more to contribute as a street activist there than just working straight for that organization, you know.
So you actually this street activism, which you persuaded me on, which I think is the most important thing that any researcher could do instead of just sitting behind the computer and being online. And there's very few. Why do you think that is?
I think because they're just virtually scared, because unfortunately there are different reactions people see with these conspiracy theories, whether they believe them all the way or not. You know, it's like if you see, you know, loose change and you believe that the government faked a plane crash and made all this deceptions. Well, if the government's, you know, big enough to do that, you know, they're monitoring us. You know, it's the same people who think they are monitored because you know, they watched the film Loose Change or they looked at a blog or website, you know. And the ironic thing is the funny thing is that person like Christopher Bolin, which I despise because he purports these theories anyways. I've saw when he first came to LA in 2014, we actually promoted his first speaking engagement here. You know, he even made that point, you know, like why don't we have more people to show up to, you know, our gatherings and all that? And he said the same thing because they think they're being monitored and all that. You know, well, Bolin, why are you putting that narrative out there? You know, and especially if you're just trying to point an Israeli conspiracy. Right. You know, why do you have this really sensational, you know, U.S. military industrial complex theory? You know, you've been wrong about the Pentagon and Flight 77. You're definitely wrong about, you know, Flight 93, that it crashed elsewhere and some other plane crashed in Shanksville. And you're definitely wrong about the plane, about suggesting that it was different planes that hit the Twin Towers. You know, even looking at the closeness of the planes hitting the buildings and, you know, wondering what kind of sparks it's making. Hey, you're not certain it's those hijacked planes, but the dancing Israelis were? Right. What's wrong with you? The dancing Israelis knew what was going on, what planes it was. They knew they were in communications. They knew when it was about to depart Boston Logan. And I have a good reason to suspect that, which is in my films. It has to do with more other moving vans that were actually in the same state at the same time. But, you know, never mind all that because Bolin's never read any of that stuff. So, you know, he, you know, that is, point being is that's the reason why you don't get enough people is because, yeah, they're scared shitless. They really think that, you know, that in this huge monolithic conspiracy.
Yeah. And basically you concentrate, like me, you basically on the geopolitical aspects of 9/11, which is a very expansive, broader view of 9/11 instead of just looking at it from a, like say, a physics point of view, or just Israel, or just Saudi Arabia. You tend to expand on all of these issues, and which often comes into conflict with certain movements and certain groups. And I would like to talk to you about this. One of those periods you concentrate on is something that most people, even for those seasoned people who are interested in 9/11, never bring up, and that's the 1993 World Trade Center bomb. How is this a direct affiliation with 2001 terrorist attacks?
Well, it's a direct affiliation just by looking at the masterminds, regardless if there's cover-ups. You just look at the fact of, okay, KSM is ultimately the mastermind. Okay, there isn't as much evidence on Osama bin Laden. They don't have enough evidence left over from the hijackers' trails, but they know from affiliations and, you know, or at least with Ramzi Ben al-Shib, you know, there's a connection there, you know.
Right, yeah.
And then you look to 1993 and you see KSM's nephew, Ramzi Youssef, who is, you know, involved in that conspiracy. And, you know, it comes straight from looking at the Arab cells. You know, people want to look for the Mossad, they want to look for the intelligence agencies and all that. It's not going to be simple of finding them, you know, in a straitjacket with, you know, microphone or I mean a radio, you know, talking and communicating. No, it's, you know, it's real. It's going to be real Arabs, real assets that have their own agendas, overlapping agendas that even coalesce with Israel. Ironically, even if they are people that even demonize and, you know, that are anti-Semitic or whatever, they have tabs on these people, you know. So that's not where you're going to find the conspiracy. You have to look at the actual, you know, the Arab suspects and who else wasn't accounted for. You know?
Right. Now, of course, this is something that you also detail in a couple of your films and reading material. We see this interesting lead up in regards to, as I would call it, revolutionary terrorism. And we both know who we're talking about when in regards to the godfather of terrorism, and Abu Nidal. Now, you're the only person that I know of, that I've seen from my experience, that ever talks about Abu Nidal. Now, there's a direct link that may be not as direct to the 9/11 attacks. We're still working on that in regards to the Jarrah family and regards to the Lockerbie bombing, because the name of the operation was Operation Jarrah. So is this, well, like, as I would say, where there's smoke, there's fire. In regards to revolutionary terrorism, we see like this evolution of terrorism attacking inside the airports with the ANO group, the Fatah, the organization Fatah, in which that Nidal helped create.
A Revolutionary Council.
Right, okay, right, or revolutionary. Thank you for the correction. And then we see, and almost like this jump from attacking people inside an airport to attacking the airport themselves, like planting bombs. This comes from Ramzi Youssef, the Baluchistan clan of Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And then from there, we see the evolution of using the actual plane as the weapon. And you bring up one of the very few people like yourself, and I'll even mention Tom Secker, who actually brings up the Bojinka Plot.
Yeah.
But you go into much more further detail. Can you give just a general description, a general background regarding the Bojinka Plot itself and how important that was?
As far as in the 90s or anything before, I mean, just that.
Yeah, just a bit. Why was, because a lot of people make this mistake, and we come across it, me and you, on a daily basis almost.
Yeah.
Where the truth movement actually likes to bring up Operation Northwoods.
Yeah, absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I think they're making the mistake, and the mistake I'm saying is that the blueprint for 9/11, when used to play, came from the Bojinka Plot.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, now as far as the Bojinka Plot goes, the apartment fire in the Philippines, where Hakim Murad, I forget, Ali Waman, Kamen Shah, I have 4 names I can't remember.
I know Walid Shah.
Yeah, Walid. And then don't forget, and then the one that they don't, it's not mentioned in all documentaries, but it's in some. KSM was also there.
That's right.
So yeah, there, you know, it's this plan to, you know, that generates into 3 phases. The first phase had to do with assassinating the Pope while he was in the Philippines, and this was in an apartment fire, that apartment that Ramzi was renting at the time. I think it was with Hakim Murad.
Yes.
But the second phase of the plan, also found on the laptop by the authorities in the Philippines there, then talked about bombing 12 planes. Now, at the same time, planes that were going to be flying either from Asia or even the West Coast, maybe even some from the East Coast, but to blow them up simultaneously at the same time over the Pacific Ocean, mainly. But then the third phase turned into making them kamikazes, hijacking them and crashing them. And, you know, I know, and I'm not going to say I believe, I know the 9/11 attacks were just the continuation and that just even greater than the Bojinka plot. If we're just going to look at Bojinka as a big attack because it means big bang. So, just look at Bojinka as an agenda, get the big attack on the U.S., and when we look at numbers and when it's saying 12 planes, well, I can tell you, and, even showing within my other film, that the 9/11 attacks were going to be greater. It wasn't just the 3 airports and the 4 planes. There were still extra planes at those same airports and several other airports throughout the East Coast that were tons of reports of weapons, either weapons found, mysterious Middle Eastern men fleeing the airport, or just outright even using the language to hijack a plane on the day of 9/11. And that they tried to hijack planes again when the airports reopened on September 13th, which the Bojinka plan also says it was also considered the 48 hours of terror. So 2 days that they would say that they would try to blow up hijack as many planes on one day, and then the following day finish at it. So that is definitely the what matters. Just figuring out. That's part of the official story. It's not even part of the official story. They won't say 9/11 is from the Bojinka plot. They just say it may be inspired. I don't believe it's inspired. But why it's also important is that, at the same time, I'm not even saying that such a plan just started and became new. I think this is a plan that was also going on for a while, and we just got past a new version of it. The first phase of it being the Pope, that doesn't matter. That's just sequential to that's where they're at. That's just an objective there.
Because he was visiting the Philippines.
Yeah, because he's visiting the Philippines. But what really the Bojinka really matters, if we forget what the FBI tells us or what Wikipedia tells us as far as that, look at the Bojinka really being about the flights, the amount of planes. 9/11 could not have been simply 4 planes. And then when even KSM says we could only have done, we thought about doing 10 planes, but we could only do 4. And we couldn't do, and we weren't going to do no explosives. Yet two of the planes are reported to have explosives by the phone calls.
Right.
So, yeah. So when you look at the Bojinka, it's tremendously important. And as I pointed out with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing plot, if people are learning to look for their Israeli links, you have to look at who Ramzi Youssef first entered the United States with. You have to look like Ahmed Ajaj, who was turned into a Mossad asset according to what's the author?
Peter Lance.
Not Peter Lance. No, he died in 2001 too. Ironically, Friedman. Robert L. Friedman. Right. Robert L. Friedman discovered from his contacts in the Mossad. He was Jewish, too. So there's also that to look at, and to consider, and especially with Ramzi Youssef himself, he's half Palestinian too.
Right.
So you have a lot of room to suggest what's something else going on there as far as that, but. The fact being, and this is where I got to give Adam Fitzgerald credit to, is that we discover in 2001 or 2002 that when the Bojinka plot happened, or when it was discovered, and they went after everyone else, and the Uncle KSM went away, Robert Mendoza and the other Philippine authorities went and found KSM's apartment he had in the Philippines. And they discovered that there was evidence that KSM had just traveled the U.S. and Israel.
Right.
So the Bojinka, if we're going to go with that idea of where it starts there, which I'm saying it does, there's your, start looking at that sort of direction of how this could have been pulled off. What's going on there. you know, especially as we like to point out, is that with KSM and the Pakistani side being anti-Iranian, anti-Shiite, you know, that's Israel's main enemy, one of the main enemy there in the Middle East. So of course there is overlapping agenda, regardless if they even say all this stuff. You know, and Ramzi Youssef, even when he got caught, and he asked specifically for a Jewish lawyer, one that wears a yarmulke and all that. So it's like, it's not, these people are not, they're not, they're educated people, ironically.
Actually, I think Ramzi Youssef actually went to the University of, he went to Great Britain, actually studied electrical engineering. Osama bin Laden actually went to the University, I think, King Fahd, and studied electrical engineering as well, and as well as business. I want to say certain business, and he was highly educated. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed actually went to the University of North Carolina, study engineering there. So it's a good point to raise that these are not just like religious fundamentalists who are stupid. These are not Muslims. These are actually highly educated people who make decisions about attacking the United States, and not because they hate our freedoms, but even Ramzi Youssef has said later that the reason why was because of our foreign policy, which is quite detrimental to the Arab region itself. And that was something that the FBI actually, Patrick Fitzgerald said to the 9/11 Commission when co-commissioner Lee Hamilton spoke to Patrick Fitzgerald saying, "Oh, why do they hate us? And why do they attack us?" And Patrick Fitzgerald said specifically, the reason why is because of our strong foreign policy to Israel itself. Now, this is also not a condemnation to Jews itself, and this is also an argument that we both face almost periodically, that we're anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish, because we do bring up that there was some Israeli intelligence involved with something like 93 and 2001, but there actually was. Can you bring I'm not going to go into detail here. Could you just bring up, especially with 93, there was an Israeli asset monitoring Mohammed Salameh, who references, who are we talking about?
Oh, Mohammed Salameh? Yeah.
Well, the person I'm talking about is the Israeli spy that was involved.
Well, before we go to Salameh, let me just say one more other correlation, or not correlation, but double thing with 93 and 9/11.
Right.
Both were used to try to flame Iraq. That's the other irony too, and people don't realize that. They don't know. They don't know about Abdul Rahman Yassin. He was busted the same day as Mohammed Salameh. Oh, perfect. This actually goes together. But right. Salameh didn't say anything, but Yassin did, and he said everything. He even explained where they went and made the bomb. He later on admitted in 2002 to 60 Minutes, but he was telling the FBI where they got the equipment and where everyone else lived, because after the bombing, when they figured out the Ryder van, and then also the stolen police report for the van and the other address that Salameh left, tracing it to Yassin, that became a whole other reason for them to try to implicate Iraq retroactively into 93 after 9/11, figuring like, well, hey, if they were a part of the first plot to bring down the towers, they still have to be in the plot for the second time to strike the towers. So they were even trying to use that aside, separate from the weapons of mass destruction, the anthrax, and the meeting with Prague with the Iraqi officers, or even Abu Nadal, ironically. But that, I don't want to get into that much detail with that, but that was even that going on. So yeah, there's the double. There's I guess I don't know how to explain it. But what were you saying about Salameh? What?
Well,
Mohammed Salami.
Well, he actually brings up the address that was linked to Josie Hadass.
Yes, well, yes, because yes, correct, and that's because of Yasin. I mean, it's the same apartment.
Right.
I mean, when they went to go look for Josie Hadass, the address, they ran into Yasin, who lives downstairs. Of course, I don't know how the FBI were able to, start to question him or get a search warrant to look into that apartment, but apparently they did, because they took Yasin to there. But that was part of the new discovery I found out with the new 1993 bombing film. When I started to realize, like, wait a minute, that's the Tunnel Avenue. That's the same freaking apartment, and he lives right above. So that's why they got, So you have to ask yourself, and that's the point I put out in the film. If that apartment, if Ramzi Youssef was living there and so did Salome with Josie Hadass, Ajaj would have been staying there if he hadn't fumbled at the JFK airport when he first brought Ramzi Youssef, and he was a Mossad asset. And then you have a Mossad spy. So they got a young Iraqi dupe downstairs. Already, Ramzi Youssef's already convinced them, because Ramzi Youssef's, he has that kind of persona, telling him, I'm like, look what America's done to your country already. Iraq, even though Yasin himself is actually an American citizen because he was born in Michigan, but his family were all Iraqi, and they moved away when he was still an infant. So he's still Iraqi, but legally he's still an American citizen. But, Ramzi Youssef's telling him all that, convincing him of all that. And the funny thing is even though Ramzi Youssef was saying that, when he was, during his first interview with Regina Duram from, I forget which Lebanese Al-Hayat newspaper, she's Ramzi Youssef, when he's talking about, what the U.S. has done, he doesn't just criticize our relationship with Israel. He points out, Hiroshima, what we did in World War II, Vietnam, and then he even brings up, ironically, Libya and Iraq. He says, look, you don't even go after the actual leaders there. You go and kill all the innocent civilians and all that. Basically alluding to that, I don't have a problem with you taking out Saddam or Gaddafi.
Right.
Just don't kill the innocent, civilians. So what is he working for? So that testimony was kind of kept hidden from people who were trying to push this Iraqi theory in 1993. They weren't showing this interview with Ramzi Youssef, and he revealed a lot about himself. Don't have all of it; only parts of it are available. The interview, but yeah.
Interestingly enough, it seems that with 93, there's a much in the way of similarities regarding 2001. And one is that the intelligence apparatuses, foreign and domestic, seem to be right there from the start. And especially in 2001, we saw the CIA, the Israeli Mossad, and the Saudi GID actually monitoring these people even years in advance. And with the NSA, even way years in advance. The NSA actually had a tap on the phone of the Ahmed al-Hada house, which is in Sana'a, Yemen, and that is the Al-Qaeda communications hub. And that started back in 1996. If you ask certain agencies, they think it was even earlier than that, but we'll take it from 96 onward. So you have to wonder, with the CIA having a tap inside the house in 98, you have the NSA tapping the house in 96, and Bin Laden's satellite phone going back to 1992, plus the Hamburg cell in the East Coast, New York, Florida, being followed by Israeli Mossad assets using moving front companies such as Urban Moving System, which you always are talking about, Classic International Movers, Max Movers, and of course, the Saudis' intelligence division, the General Intelligence Division out west, who are actually giving money to two hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, which was coming from the bank account of one Haifa bin Faisal, who was using Riggs' bank account directed to who? Bandar bin Sultan, the U.S. Saudi ambassador. What would be your peeve regarding why do you think these foreign and domestic intelligence agencies had such a head start regarding these terrorist operatives in what we see in '93, especially in 2001? And I think we both can agree it's regarding maybe a mole inside the group, or that they had intelligence relating to them from intelligence agencies regarding what was being, what was constructing regarding these two incidences.
Well, what was the question?
Well, the question would be, what are your thoughts regarding the intelligence apparatuses
that are there?
Yeah, that are there.
You know,
Now I'm also almost like implying you to speculate as well too. So.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's like, yeah, someone can make it a conspiracy. Like, yeah, they're just keeping these people quiet so they can go off and hit the U.S. and there's some U.S. they are some straight up U.S. insiders. But there's also the other side, which I tend to more agree that likely they think that these people are here just to train and become their future proxy forces to go and fight overseas. They're just here temporarily because this is where they can stay. You know, that's part of what I think maybe why they just look the other way. You know, depending on who, because it's like, you know, if we're talking about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, the Flight 77 hijackers, you know, that sounds to me like, you know, just you know, the NSA, you know, not notifying basically the CIA, and the CIA not notifying, you know, the FBI. Yeah, there's something going on there. It's like, you know, why didn't they? You know, I don't think that they were allowing them in here because they were going to, you know, set up a training camp or whatever, and then, you know, then we would just, you know, use them somewhere else. I mean, that does happen. We've had these kinds of proxy groups here. I mean, we have military training schools where we're, you know, training Hispanic, you know, basically to become dictators of other countries. We trained them in military school. It was called the School of Americas. You know, we've had that excuse. I mean, even in recent we discovered, you know, Libyan dissidents that the U.S. was monitoring and taking care of here in the U.S. because, you know, we were working them elsewhere to, you know, try to overthrow Gaddafi. So you know, there was that going on here, especially a lot of Pakistani groups. And there was definitely a lot of Pakistani presence here quite a while as well too, you know. So, you know, that's when in regards to like maybe these other operatives, like, you know, we think that there were other operatives here involved in 9/11 that were still here during the '93 bombing. I mean, there's Nabil Marab, the one who lived back and forth between Canada. You know, he was here since 1989, and they didn't catch him in 1993. How many times? In Boston he lived, in Chicago he lived, in New York he lived, you know, Florida he lived. All next to all these operatives, always driving cab, access to airports. You know, why would they keep that? But they obviously did because he was fighting. Sometimes he'd take off and go fight in Chechnya. Sometimes, you know, or Kosovo or Bosnia. I forget which ones. I know he did Chechnya, or he actually even did. May have actually done a little bit of Afghanistan for what I know. You know, that could be their excuse. But I mean, but it's something to say. Just like with a person like Nabil Arab, I mean, they're already committing crimes. Why are they getting let go all the time? You know, why would they be letting Khalid al-Mihdhar if they know he's the suspect in the USS Cole bombing? You know.
Oh, just so to elaborate for our listeners, who's Nabil Marab, by the way?
Nabil Marab is Kuwaiti but Syrian family, so he takes Syrian nationality apparently. He was living here since 1989. He was caught right after 9/11 in the Chicago area. He was seen meeting with all the main hijackers, all of them, especially in Canada. He was making fake IDs because his uncle owned a photocopy place that did printing or whatever. He was making them I mean, Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shadi, I believe even Ziad al-Jar were seen with him in Canada And then he would be met with even other Saudi operatives, even when he was in the border. He was back and forth. He worked in Boston. He knew operatives. I get his name, Kaj, the American-born Lebanese that ended up fighting in the Millennium Plot. One of them even died, I think. Another one even died. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The guy has as many connections, like same degree connections as Zacharias Moussaoui. You can see so many, but you don't ever see that Moussaoui and Merab ever met. But my God, they're just surrounded by people that have all crossed and met, and especially when you look at where Merab was at. Merab was in Chicago, was in the north, the northwest, where he was caught, which is basically where Moussaoui was at, But right. Merab, I mean, he was nuts. I mean, you look at the photo of Mohammed Atta and people think, yo, you look crazy. I'm like, no, look at Merab. He looked crazy. I mean, it wouldn't even be gross speculation to even think that he may have been the real ringleader of it all. And that he was supposed to be at midpoint, that he was supposed to hijack a flight from Flight 90 from the Chicago airport, because he actually had contact with other suspects that flew in late, which is another story.
Right.
So, he was back and forth there. And he was connected with another cell in Detroit as well, this guy, and then what happened? Yeah, they caught this guy a day or two later after 9/11. They were already hunting for him because his name had to come up. I mean, with too many affiliations. But we don't hear anything about it. They keep his court case. Keep his case completely legally sealed, so it cannot even intertwine or go into other. It couldn't cross into Moussaoui's case, or it couldn't get involved in the case with the Detroit sleeper cell. It was completely quieted, and the guy is just let go a year and a half later, and they just deport him. And apparently, some sources had said that they had flipped him. The CIA, they flipped him. But then he goes to Syria, and he gets caught there within less than a few weeks or a month, and he's been in jail in Syria ever since, and nobody knows anything about him.
This is almost similar to another individual regarding him inside the United States and having contacts, and somebody that we bring up sometimes once in a while, Ali Muhammad. When he's inside the United States, he's actually in the Green Berets, but meanwhile, he's allowed to leave the Green Berets and actually conduct operations in Afghanistan and fight against the Soviets in 1979. And I'm sorry, I think it was 1986. He actually goes to Afghanistan, and supposedly he brings back a Soviet belt that he took off a commander. And you have people in the Green Berets who are actually floored. In fact, I think one of the lieutenant generals, I think it's Frank Anderson. I'm probably going to be wrong about the first name, but it's something Anderson. And he actually complains about that Ali Muhammad is actually someone who works for the CIA, because it would have to come from up top in regards to the agencies that allow him to travel outside and conduct in operations foreign wars. But he comes back inside the United States, and he's actually, just like Merab that you bring up, he has many contacts. He has contacts with Osama bin Laden, Omar Abdul Rahman, which is the Brooklyn cell in Al Farouk, which is connected to the Landmarks plot, which I want to talk to you in a bit about that. And yes, this guy's, and all of a sudden, he's actually arrested, and then you never hear from him again. No. Supposedly, he actually gives the FBI everything they wanted, and the FBI complained to the CIA that, yeah, he was a CIA agent and that they never told the FBI, and that's something that we see across with September 11th, that they didn't share the information, and all of a sudden, do we ever hear from him again? No. We never hear from Ali Muhammad again, even to the present day. We don't even know where he is. We don't even know if he was even sentenced for his role in the supposed alleged role for the 1980 East African bombing.
He's the biggest thing. Yeah, that's where the real obstacle is at. It's why we keep talking about the real answers to everything is really at 93. Even if we wanted to be talk, even with prisoners, you have the Supermax prison in Colorado, where luckily you do got a 9/11 as a conspirator. You got Zacharias Moussaoui there, but hell, you got everybody from 93 practically. East Africa embassy bombing. I mean, dude. I mean, who are all these people, you know, who were they working for? And then, of course, the one that people are afraid to tie in together, the Oklahoma City bombing. You know, and
where's the what's the link relevant to that?
Too many of them. But I'll nail it. I mean, but I mean, obviously, you know, Mitchell Gray, the person you interviewed, which I do recommend that anybody who's listening to this go back and listen to the interview that Adam and Richard did of Mitchell Gray, the author of "I Heard You Were Going on Jihad," because his book is, I recommend getting it because you're going to get a good summary history of what's going on there in Oklahoma and the surrounding areas that actually relate to the 9/11 attacks.
Right.
And it's well put out because it does include the activity of the 1993 World Trade Center bombers. I reference it in my film, you know, but it also gets to the OKC as well. You know, basically summarizing a lot of the stuff that was already written by Jana Davis. Now, I don't agree with Jana Davis' full conclusion on the book. Her book is called The Third Terrorist, but I do recommend people do read it. Regardless of, you know, I have issue with one of the sources she used in there. You can quickly figure out who it is when you start to read it.
Yeah.
but you know, she was just doing her best at being, you know, Oklahoma girl. She, you know, what she witnessed and what she dealt with there matters. Yes, you know, ultimately, yes, the John Doe number 2, Hussein al-Husseini, does matter, and the quickest link you see already with him to 9/11 is that, you know, he gets away with the Oklahoma City bombing. He gets busted maybe a little bit later for a DUI in Texas, but then he ends up going back to Boston and ends up getting a job at Boston Logan Airport.
Right.
And he was working there even up until the day of 9/11. He wasn't working there the day of, but still was employed there. I forget what kind of catering job or whatever he was doing exactly there. But right up until that, in 1998 and 97, he was having panic attacks at work, and he was, you know, he was told to go see a psychiatrist. You know, and we're talking about the late 90s. You know, there's the Millennium Plot going on. There's still anthrax threats talking about, believe it or not. There's dry runs that we don't hear about because we know about them now. But there are dry runs going on in the airports already elsewhere, JFK, elsewhere. So there's, you know, the 9/11 attacks were already working its way to happen on the millennium or right before. So people need to understand that. They just got us in 2001. But Hussein al-Husseini, you know, he's having these panic attacks. He's told to go see a psychiatrist. He's telling him he has all these problems, and he says that if something happens at work, I feel they're going to end up blaming me.
Right.
You know, it's a foreboding prediction, and that's just too much. You know, when you see that already, you know, separate from him being Iraqi, there's a lot of question of, you know, his character. I don't believe everything that Jana Davis lays out in the book about him. You know, I don't think he was serving Saddam. I think he was probably an anti-Saddam Iraqi, but believe it or not. But her research on the person that employed Hussein al-Husseini, the landlord and all that, holy crap, that is very important. And that's one of the great things that also Mitchell Gray also covered in his book too. But that's one link already you have going forward into 9/11. Backwards into 1993, you have Terry McNichols, who's taking periodic trips to Philippines. He's already has a Philippine mail order wife, but you know, he's in the same city as during when Ramzi Youssef is still a fugitive and basically working the Bojinka Plot. Right. You know, at the same time. So
the city is Cebu.
There's also city of Cebu. Yeah, right. Exactly. So then there's also a CIA asset named Angels is his last name. I forget.
Edwin Angels.
Yes. Yeah. He's confirmed that there was a meeting between somebody that were calling the farmer and Ramzi Youssef that they did. So, you know, he was there like 9 times. You know, and there's also apparently some people have talked to Terry Nichols, congressmen have, and apparently he's willing to go on the record and say things that he he knows about all these attacks.
Would that be Dana Rohrabacher?
Dana Rohrabacher would be one of
Rohrabacher.
them. Yeah, it would be Dana Rohrabacher. So you have that connection going on there, and there's a bunch of other ones that Gray does mention, but I think I'm forgetting what there's another one. The thing is that with Oklahoma, even Abdullah Azzam actually even spoke there, when he was,
Right.
up until last year he was alive. So it was already recruitments that are going on there for Akhtam, Kitty, I can't remember, Kiddimont or the other mosques that were there, all affiliated. Al Farouk or Majid and so
Masjid al-Salam.
Masjid al-Salam, and then there's other people tied in with that were there that before Zacharias Mashawi showed up,
Right.
that are suspect that go back into that time frame. I don't want to give it away because people need to read the book to see it.
Right.
But directly with the Oklahoma City bombing, those are the links that cross over. Even though you have people were wondering what was Timothy McVeigh, what's his, well, look, they don't have John Doe number 2. We know that McVeigh was lying. He even took credit for the whole thing. He even said that Terry McNichols didn't have anything to do with it, and Terry McNichols is admitted guilt to it.
Why do you think he lied about that?
I don't know. There's just too many speculation about that, and a lot of the speculation is really outlandish. There's people who think he could have been mind control. I'm not gonna like laugh at that, but maybe, but I'm not convinced of it. I don't think, like Jaina Davis thinks that maybe he became Islamic. I'm like, this is not Islamic. This is not like he's, is he mad about fighting in Iraq, the Desert Storm, because he was there? Yeah, it could have something to do with that. It could be that he sympathizes with the, what we did to Iraq, for all we know. I don't know. But I think, the fact that he was attracted to a lot of conspiracy theories, even ones that are very harmonized with Alex Jones, like unbelievably. I mean,
There's actually one conspiracy, if I can interrupt just a bit. There's one conspiracy surrounding Timothy McVeigh I'd never heard of, but it was brought up by John Judge, the late John Judge. John Judge actually said in an interview back in 2000, and I want to say 6, he actually states that that maybe that the Department of Defense and the higher-ups that were involved with Timothy McVeigh's handlers may have promised him that they weren't going to give him sodium pentothal, and that they were just going to knock him out and make believe that they did kill him, and that when the curtain came out that he would just be wheeled out in the back and he'll be okay and hidden away forever somewhere in the United States or abroad. And I always thought that would be like a plausible scenario. Like they just gave him like, I don't know, like some sedative, and that he was just knocked out and killed. And according to John Judge, he says that some people in the gallery that were watching his execution actually saw him move afterwards. But that could be too that, the body twitches after his death. But like he says at the end, he goes, who knows with Timothy McVeigh, and I agree. But who knows?
I've entertained that theory too. I've thought, maybe that's maybe,
right.
But what was it with the there was something? Oh, that's right. What made me even think about it too is that some of the prisoners that were with him in death row, or maybe not even death row, but up until at some point they were in jail with him. They had done an interview, and I've even heard it. I heard it on Infowars. I remember this, and they were saying that that's what Timothy McVeigh was saying, that they were gonna fake it all too. But it's like, how do you trust me? You're gonna trust a prisoner?
Right.
It's like it's not a really credible source. I mean, of course, the guy will say anything sensational, especially for getting the ratings. And we know Alex Jones is a fraud, anyways.
Right.
And he's destroyed that whole theory too, because he just makes it, it's just a war on you. It's a war on Christian American conservatives and gun owners and back with McVeigh. It does seem like also that he was maybe also dabbling in, really was into the whole neo-Nazi thing too. That is also that's also possible too, because I mean I'm not against criticizing Israel, but it's like you know, that some of the things that he was getting into was deemed as anti-Semitic.
Right.
And the one of the things that I will say it, and it was even mentioned in Jana Davis's book, even though there's more detail of it in Michael Colin Piper's The Judas Goats.
Right.
McVeigh had an ad for some kind of weird flare gun thing in American Free Press. Oh no, not American Free Press, the Spotlight magazine, before it became American Free Press.
Interesting.
And that so basically they had you know, he was a reader. He knew about he knew about AFP and Spotlight magazine. You know, they were always covering Israeli crimes, Jewish, you know, Jewish organized crime, a lot of stuff all into that. So, you know, was he genuinely into that and basically, you know, colluded with these Arabs because they all saw the same enemy being Israel and Judaism? You know, that I think is very possible. Sure. Because, you know, the big question really needs to be is really at Andreas Straussner. It's, you know, because then you have the whole Elohim city. And this is where people get pissed off with Jana Davis. She doesn't go into the white national Christian identity conspiracy, you know, but it's worth looking at because, you know, McVeigh did go there. McVeigh, it's proven fact that he had contact with Andreas Straussner. Right. The compound Elohim City was basically, they were all associates and friends of John Snell, or his first name may not be John, but Richard Snell. Richard Snell, the one who ended up being executed on the day of the bombing, you know, who in 1983 was talking of a plot to attack the J.P. Murrah building. So that's not a coincidence. And, you know, and McVeigh went around talking about, oh, you guys watch, you know, 420, you know, April 4th, April 20th, it's going to be a big day. Well, for a long time, they knew that's when Richard Snell was going to be, you know, not assassinated, but executed. So that all matters because it's like what, you know, with the witness account from, my God, what was her name? The ATF informant that was in the compound, in the Elohim City compound, Carol Howe. That's her name, Carol Howe. She witnessed all this stuff from Andreas Strassmeyer talking about blowing up buildings and all this stuff. And this guy is experiencing that because, you know, he went to military, you know, school or military academy in Hamburg, Germany. Okay. And his father's a politician. I believe even something to do with the city, or actually the city police. Where is the Hamburg cell? you know, that with 9/11. So that, you know, that's just a really weird connection. I mean, and then aside all that, for people who are looking for Israeli links into 1993, you know, possible links, when you look at Andreas Straussmeyer, for a neo-Nazi, he certainly liked having an Israeli girlfriend and learning Hebrew.
Right.
Because he was found with all that when he was living in England, apparently, as well, too. And he had traveled to Israel. So, and yes, the Israeli Mossad, Israeli intelligence, has been able to infiltrate Nazi groups. They've done it multiple times. It doesn't sound crazy, but it's, you know, they're able to get into the Arab fundamentalist world, right, you know, very easily, but also on the white side too. Sure. I mean, you know, Christian fundamentalism, you know, right, you want to call it that, you know. So that's what people should, you know, look into, you know.
Right. Now going back, I want to get. I was going to get back to the landmarks plot in '93. Now this is a point of contention between people that we run into all the time. That it was the FBI that built the bomb that was used for the world. That was used for the World Trade Center. But the big mistake is that Emad Salem was not involved with the bombing of the World Trade Center, because by that time the FBI had actually kicked him out of the being an informant. And there was a big scandal involving Nancy Floyd, his handler, his FBI handler, regarding that. And that's when they brought in Ramzi Youssef. It was actually Abdel Rahman who called Pakistan, who got in Ramzi Youssef. Now, you have done extensive work regarding the landmark plot, and this is something that is absolutely ignored.
Yeah.
In regards to the truth movement. And can you explain what was the landmarks plot?
The landmark plot was the follow-up after the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, 4 months afterwards. Basically, it was remaining members of the cell with Omar Abdel Rahman, who later ends up getting suspected of being involved with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, because a couple of the 93 bombing conspirators, Mohammed Saleh, Mahmoud Abolina, and Nadel Ayad, they were maybe not frequent, but they had attended. Ramzi Youssef and Ahmed Ajaz were different stories, but you have that going on. So, when they brought, they were obviously upset. They wanted to get after these people. So yeah, they brought Imad Salem to go back into infiltrating the cell, and he ends up hooking up with Siddiqui. I forget what his last name is.
Sadiq Ali.
Sadiq Ali. Wasn't he Sudanese or Sudanese or?
No, you're right. That's right.
He's Sudanese. There's more than one. There's another Sudanese involved too.
Right. Yeah.
But he ends up hooking up with them. They're all end up talking about building bombs.
The targets, I think, were the United Nations.
Yeah, the targets were the United Nations, George Washington Bridge, United Nations, all the tunnels, the federal building where the FBI was at, even possibly striking the Twin Towers again. All this stuff. But they ended up finally busting it. The FBI gave Imad Salem a warehouse to, basically entrapment. Truth entrapment thing. But after the bust, they end up not only also finding out that the blind sheikh's involved, but so is Rabbi Meir Kahana's killer, El Said Nosser. Yeah, that's the big, most important one. Is really El Said Nosser, regardless if these people were in jail. He was in jail the entire time for all these crimes, but they were able to tie him. Everybody that was involved was going them and consulting with them. Even the landmark plot bombers, after the bust happens and when the court case is being settled, then they end up finding out that, the defense for the blind sheikh, for the 93 bombers and the landmark plot bombers ended up finding out that they had Imad Salem infiltrated the cell before the bombing of the World Trade Center. Then that's when it started to appear about the tapes, the tape recordings he did. And the problem is people, the truth movement, and through Alex Jones, basically sensationalizing it and editing it in short snippets, he makes it almost appear that this is like a recording, like before the bombing, or like right after, or in direct communication with doing it, and it has nothing to do with it. It's basically, when it comes to when Imad Salem left the FBI, it's kind of up to debate. It depends on what you want to believe, what Salem said, or it depends if you want to believe what FBI agent John Antisev said, or others, because he said that they wanted to wear a wire. Some sources say he wanted more money, and he ended up getting that money after the 93 bombing. And he says he wasn't watching the cell when it happened. Some sources have said that he may have still had a bird's eye view. You have to kind of wonder, how did the Egyptian government end up finding out that they were going to bomb the World Trade Center bomb, that there was going to be attack on the U.S. before it happened? I mean, Imad Salem, as you can clearly see in the History Channel documentary, I mean, he was there. He was high-ranking at one time, and he was there when they assassinated Sadat. So, he's there like right next to, unfortunately it's a crisis, but he's there to, forget who was the last Egyptian president, Mumbar, what's his name? The last Egyptian president.
Gamal Nasser?
Nasser, the last one, the one that took over.
Hosni Mubarak.
Hosni Mubarak, yeah. So, you know, he had to be pretty up there as far as an intelligence. And yeah, he would want to be keeping an eye on the blind sheik anyway. I mean, if Ayman Zawahiri was there instead, they would have been keeping an eye. He would have been there keeping an eye on him. Those were all the people that were responsible for, you know, setting the political climate up for the assassination of Saddam. So, you know, that, you know, regardless of what, you know, the FBI is, you know, doesn't want him watching the cell, he still has, you know, he still could be taking orders from Egypt still. You know, I'm not saying that it means that, oh, that he still was involved in making the bomb. No, then you wouldn't have Ramzi Youssef, you wouldn't have Hajjaj. And Hajjaj is the one that really matters when it comes down to it. He had the bombing manuals. He had the experience. Ramzi Youssef, this is only a learning, you know, a learning experience.
Because he actually keeps in contact with a judge during the first
the entire time. They were making fun of the fact that they gave him his manuals back while he was still in the INS jail. They said, "What a joke you guys are, man! You guys are not, you know, you guys are not protecting yourselves." I mean, the American system in general. They were making fun of it all the time.
Actually, it was actually the Immigration and Natural Services that gave back the bombing manuals back to Ahmed Hajjaj. And the one woman who actually was in charge, she actually was incredulous that the decision was made to give it back to him.
We don't even have an exact report or detail of where they finally apprehended Hajjaj, because he apparently had just got out, like right after the bombing.
Right.
So we don't even know where, but we don't know if he was picked up at the mosque or whatnot, but they certainly did want to trace him, because they started tracing all of Ramzi Youssef's phone calls. They were realizing, man, he called the fucking prison all the damn time, talking to Hajjaj all the time. So, you know, all we know is that he did get out. He got out, like, it may have been a day or two. I mean, what was it? It wasn't until March 3rd until when they figured out the rider.
I think you're right. That's
the rider van.
Right.
Yeah.
They got the VIN number. Right.
Yeah, it may have been March 3rd, March 4th when Hajjaj had got out too. So we don't even know where they, you know, who did he go stay with that once he got out with, you know? I don't know. That's a mystery, you know? But what's not a mystery is that all the evidence, all the incriminating evidence, all his history, you know, what he was doing. So we're going back talking about Salem, though, basically. We're talking about, so, yeah, you know, so that's why they had them there, you know, they were there. They didn't have no need for Salem. So Salem comes back, you know, and then you find this, you know, this whole cell of other, you know, other ones involved, you know, people from Afghanistan, people from Sudan, Hispanics. There was even like Puerto Rican converts, or ones from Dominican Republic, I believe may have been, that were involved in the landmark plot.
Yeah.
So
Rodney Hamptonell, I think.
Rodney Hamptonell.
Yeah.
There's a weird connection with him. And I don't want to give that away, but Mitchell Gray puts it in his book, which is really good.
Good point. That's right.
Yeah. So so people got the phone calls, and, you know, people got I'm sorry, not the phone calls. So, you know, the conspiracy theorists got the, you know, the tape recordings, and of course the defense for the landmark plot and the 93 bombers were trying to use that. Yes, this is a conspiracy behind the FBI. So, you know, with them being involved. So what these conspiracy theorists don't know is that they're buying into a defense argument for the fundamentalists, regardless what they agree with them or not. But in the long run, it didn't amount as any evidence to prove that they were involved. I mean, completely opposite. And it's just, they don't understand that, you know, once they're paying him over $1 million. I mean, I think it may have been $2 million. I think it was $2 million.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, you know. You know, he was still worried about recording them, and you know, with the, you know, he had his problems with the suitcase they give him to try to record the blind sheik, to, you know, you know, to offer a bayat or you know, condone an attack, you know. And it's really not a very good job, because it's like, you know, he's the one coming up with it. You know, we're going to do this and do that. We're going to attack the UN and this. No. Don't attack anywhere. That will ruin diplomatic, you know, diplomacy for the Muslims around the world. He says, go attack
There was an army base. An army base.
Army base,
right,
or what do you call it? An infirmaries. You know, he says, go attack that. You know.
Right.
You know, so he was saying to fight it like militarily, like nobly.
Right.
You know, so it doesn't. You can't put him on the. You know, especially as like what we pointed out, especially if these people were already under the control or under the guise or influence, shall I say, of El Said Nasser.
Mm-hmm.
These guys were all rolling with him, going to those shooting ranges back in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
The blind sheik don't move until 1990.
The Galveston shooting range.
The Galveston shooting range, yeah. The blind sheik don't move till 1990.
Right.
You know, it's just like what I pointed out with, you know, Abu Halima. You know, he got radicalized in Germany. He didn't get radicalized by the blind sheik.
Right. That's right.
So who are we to say that it's just these, you know, these imams that are, you know, that can be basically radicalizing, or, you know, can be used by intelligence agents to do what they're doing. But, you know, who's to say it's only them? How many of them do you think, you know, we shouldn't be naive and not think that there's a lot of them do, that there are other ones out there. Of course there is. And we know there isn't, you know, even with it goes on in the UK and recent with the guy with the one hand, with the hook.
I think his name is Abu Hamza.
Yeah, Hamza Hamza with the eye patch.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of those people.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, too, about Omar Abdel-Rahman, and you talk about the intelligence apparatuses that were involved in these cells. In 1989, he goes to a U.S. embassy in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt, and it was monitored by the CIA. And actually, it was a CIA case agent officer dressed as an embassy officer who actually handles the applications for Abdel-Rahman, who's trying to get a dual entry visa. And he actually approves of the visa. And meanwhile, it's a CIA case officer, and not just once, but 4 times. He approves of the application, and all this while Rahman is under a terrorist watch list. Now, if that sounds familiar to the listener, that's what happened to J. Michael Springman, who was handling the visa applications of certain hijackers that were involved with the September 11 attacks. He actually suspended those applications, but he was overridden by his superior, Shania Steiger, who later had an affiliation with the CIA itself. And that's how they became involved with the September 11 attacks. Meanwhile, you know, people like Springman, who actually, a poor guy, is actually trying to do his job, he's overridden. Meanwhile, with Rahman, he's actually given his U.S. visa by the CIA, basically. And their result was, we didn't know he was on the watch list. I mean, you know, you take it where you want to will, but
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Fast forward. We're here, September 11, 2001. We're finally here. American Airlines 11 slams into the North Tower. United Airlines Flight 175 into the South. American Airlines 77 into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 crashes in Somerset County, Shanksville. But that's not the whole story, is it? There are many anomalies that you cover many times, and one of them is a film that I really like. It's basically a very obscure anomaly, which you hinted on, regarding the extension of the Bojinka Plot, the 48 hours of terror, which was right. Not many people know about the nickname to it. The thwarted hijackings of 9/11, 9/13. This is a story that is sorely underreported, and is so important as to how 9/11 was supposed to be, as you just said previously, a much bigger operation. Can you just elaborate on what was going on September 13th, 2001?
Well, with September 13th, 2001, when airports started to reopen after the FAA's no-fly ban that was also, put on by the Department of Transportation, by around noon, well, depending on which airports, but by around noon, JFK started to get reports of weird, suspicious activities, people even threatening to have a bomb on them.
Right.
And then it escalated into the airport being shut down a few hours later with people disguised in airport uniforms and some suspects being on board an American Airlines flight about to depart. And it wasn't just reported at that New York airport, but it was also reported at LaGuardia Airport, where there was 6 other people. And same situation where they were at least trying to board a flight and found with suspicious items, weapons as well. For another flight, I forget which flight, it may have been flight 299. So the airports ended up shutting down because there was the threat started to, well, people started thinking that there were going to be more hijacking attempts again.
Right.
And it didn't seem like it was just going to be one plane. I mean, there was potentially enough people to do 2 planes, possibly.
Right.
This is, this also happened somewhat in Miami as well. There's one also rare report that came out late in the morning after early morning 9/14, late evening 9/13, September 13th. That there was people arrested fleeing a restroom, Middle Eastern people changing into their flight garment in the restroom, and then fleeing when airport security got there, and they ended up being arrested. We don't know we obviously don't have a flight to pin them on, but they're there as an operative to do something to make something happen. Yeah, there was the potential for more planes to be hijacked the days afterwards, and there were other reports of weapons being found on other planes left over, other airports. But the real strongest point, where you see this really happens, is not necessarily noticing the second day or the night, September 13th, 2 days after. It's really when you look at the day of 9/11. And this is something I didn't cover in my film, but I'm going to cover in a new version. But regarding back to JFK Airport, what you have is a 5th plane that almost got hijacked. And we know about it because we've even seen interviews from the co-pilot on the plane that there was 3 Middle Eastern men that were about to, that were extremely mad when we weren't taking off, and when the plane wasn't taking off, while flights had just been grounded because Flight 175 had just struck the World Trade Center.
You're talking about you're talking about United Airlines Flight 23.
Yes, United Airlines Flight 23 at JFK Airport on 9/11. It's called the 5th plane. You can Google search it, and it usually comes up with it. But there are more 5th planes.
Right.
This flight was about to take off. It was in line to take off. So once the pilots got the word that no one's taking off, these Middle Eastern men got upset, were raising hell, pounding on the doors, basically unruly. And then when they got back, taxied back to the runway, they, obviously causing a scene. They left. They met with one other person somewhere down the ways, and then all of them just left the airport, never to be found again. So they said. But these people came back on September 13th. They were the same people that were caught 2 days later on September 13th. May have been dressed in uniforms, may have been trying to hijack a different flight. But these people, what I'm saying is that there were attempts on the day of 9/11. And when they did not succeed, they tried at it again on some cases. But there are some cases on 9/11 where the hijacking may have been actually aborted, where maybe not all the operatives were on board. Maybe some chickened out. Maybe some ran into technical difficulties. Maybe they couldn't get on flight. Maybe they couldn't get the weapons on board. Maybe they, there is a whole bunch of potentials. But it's not just JFK Airport, and there may have been another flight at JFK Airport too. It could have been 2 planes. When you go to look at Boston Logan, and this one I'm going to cover much more in depth in my film, there is Delta 1989. This flight was even flying at one point right next to Flight 93, going, and it ended up landing in Ohio, Cincinnati, and ended up being grounded. And conspiracy theorists tried to use this excuse as that was actually Flight 93 that landed, that it wasn't Delta in 1989. No, Delta in 1889 did land. It did board Boston Logan the same time as the Flight 11-175, all with its departure, with its to arrive in LA. But when it did land, there were at least 2 Middle Eastern suspects on the flight reported to be acting very suspicious. There was even passengers interviewed that were saying that these men, before even takeoff, they couldn't sit down. They were constantly looking out the windows like they were impatiently waiting for someone. So yeah, it is a situation where some of the other operatives may have chickened out.
Sure.
But it was a plane that was potentially targeted, especially when you look at why you don't have cameras from Boston Logan Airport.
Right.
You know, and that's not the only flight. There is another American Airlines flight 43 at Boston Logan. Men left hurriedly afterwards because the plane was actually luckily had malfunction and was delayed. And it was delayed long enough until the no-fly ban came on. Then these guys left. So you have the potential of 4 planes, not potential, you have confirmed 2 planes, but the potential that they wanted to use 4 planes out of there to launch. And there is even a 5th one. And the 5th one, I will tell you, because I'm going to just nail it off. There could have even been 5. But they chickened out because this 5th plane, which was headed to Seattle, I believe, had a boatload of U.S. Marines on there. Big U.S. Marines, right? So, you know, if you're going to be a crew of 4 or 5, hijackers, you ain't gonna survive shit. You ain't taking over a plane full of a bunch of fucking Marines. And they said it was targeted, and I had the report. The reason why they know this flight was targeted is that it's also on the list with the names found in the rental car at Boston Logan. So there's even extra. That's why we haven't released this list. It's not just a list of 50 other names that because it's only 19 hijackers supposedly. There's supposed to be a list of of flights that are going to be going to be used. And this is one other flight. I forget the flight number. It's an American Airlines flight or United Airlines flight. I think that's what it is. But yeah, you had the potential there. Go into Dulles Airport. Yeah, there is not a very good detailed report, but there's a report of a plane in Washington where Middle Eastern men had left the flight hurriedly when it was canceled because of the no-fly ban. Go to what's the next airport? Newark Airport in New Jersey, where Flight 93 took off of. There is also American Airlines 1776, or not 1776, 1726. This was a plane that had 2 Pakistanis, Mohammed Asmath and Ayub Khan. I forget the full names. These guys were found with. These guys lived in the neighborhood of where the 93 World Trade Center bombing conspirators had lived at, right near the mosque, the same neighborhood. They were found with all this incriminating stuff. Their plane landed. There was only 2 of them. It could have been a situation like I'm saying about Delta 1989. Maybe their other conspirators backed out, chickened out. Another reason why you don't have security cameras from Newark Airport. Right. So there may have been more planes at Newark Airport there, but I mean, that's a whole other story. Those guys ended up being caught in Texas because they ended up getting grounded in Michigan, I forget where, and then they ended up jumping on a plane, and then Texas cops noticed them the next day acting really, really weird or arguing with each other, actually. Found all this, incriminating evidence, even box cutters.
Right, box
cutters, ironically. Right. And that's the narrative they used. They used their report to solidify Flight 77 having a box cutter, therefore making all 3 planes have box cutters, which is bullshit.
Right.
But these guys had hair dye. Hair dye was also reported to be found in the rental car at Logan or the rental car in Portland, Maine. One of the 2, I forget which one. So, you know, but their bodies were shaved. So
Yeah.
some of these commands, Islamic commands, or what they were supposed to do, said that they were going to shave their own their bodies. So, you know,
perfume on, I think.
Perfume on and all
Right,
that.
right.
So they said that one of their rendezvous points, maybe a person of contact, was another suspect, which I won't get into. It's in Texas, Dr. Badar. It's a whole other story. So yeah, you know, there's another plane, and look, it goes to Miami. You know, Atlanta, there was reports.
Right.
There's even reports of a couple others in the Northwest. Chicago, as we already talked about with Nabil Marab, the
Lebanese.
Kuwaiti
Right.
of Syrian descent, the one who's been here from 1989, the one I think that could be the real ringleader. You know, he's there in Chicago. Then you have L.A., San Francisco. Yes, there's even cases. There's even San Diego, I even believe. It could have been nuts. It could have been 12. It could have been 20 planes.
Right, sure.
Well, I think it was. I think they wanted to do well more than 20 planes. They had all the manpower here. So that's why it's really crucial and important to revisit the Dragnet. Look at how many people were arrested. Look at the Inspector General's the Office of Inspector General's list of INS detainees related to the September 11th investigation. What you will find there, aside for hundreds of Israelis, you will find, you know, a list of 700 plus people, all Middle Eastern, all of them. These people were all suspects. Some of these people stayed in jail for years. Some of them ended up being like cases like the Bill Arab, for all we know.
Right, sure.
But these were all scattered throughout all the major cities, major areas. These were all different cells. They were all a potential plane or potential bombing. I still don't discount that there could have been vehicle bombings. I'm sure there was. You know, I'm sure there was other plans, maybe even poisoning water, like what the warnings were after 9/11. Look at the chaos and the crisis after 9/11. Don't focus on the World Trade Center. It's not going to take you anywhere.
Right. And also one anomaly also you're familiar with too, and you're probably the only person that ever brings it up, is the 3 Qatari men that backed out.
Yeah.
The eve of the attacks, no less.
Yeah, they could have been taking a flight. They may have been doing a flight from Dulles, but they could have been doing a flight from Maryland.
Right.
We know they already compromised Maryland. But Mohammed Atta was reported by another Delta flight to ride a jump seat from Maryland to Florida.
Right.
You know, so they had of course they wanted to hit DC as many places, parts as they can, and the CIA headquarters. They wanted to strike it. All of it, nuclear power facility.
Sure.
You know, the Pennsylvania airports. You know, I mean, it sounds like I mean, to some people are like, well, it sounds like you're getting into the hysteria of like when people were freaked out afterwards after 9/11. Yes.
Right.
I am.
Right.
You should be, because it wasn't attack. You know, we all could have been targets. You know, and yeah, that's what. I mean, some of the reactions was wrong. Obviously, all the hate crimes and people, you know,
Right.
destroying Muslim neighborhoods, Arab communities, all that, of course. But you got to think twice about it now. Obviously, the administration was ready to react, and they already had their scope on Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. But, you know, we should have had a proper investigation. That is where the real investigation was.
Sure.
And that's the investigation that is incomplete.
Right.
You know, so if we don't look at that, we're never going to get anywhere regarding 9/11, and we're making ourselves sitting ducks.
Absolutely.
The conspiracy theories, the mainstream conspiracy theories are not protecting you. Sorry, not at all. Doing the absolute backwards, endangering you.
That's
endangering your mental health too.
Right. That's another good point. Another anomaly, actually. And this is the juicy anomaly that certain people in the truth movement tend to throw away when they say there's no hijackers or fake phone calls. I think you might know where I'm going with this, and it ties in all the way back to a point I raised earlier with you. United Airlines Flight 93. And very few people, such as yourself, Ryan Dawson has brought this up once in a while, regarding the number of the phone calls that were made on that plane. all contradict the narrative by the FBI pen bomb investigation and the 9/11 Commission report, stating that there were 4 hijackers in the plane. Well, 6 phone calls were made that all 6 specifically state that there were 3. Now, 3 of those phone calls, one of them from Jerry Glick, and the other one from flight attendant, I think, Sandra Bradshaw, states that all 3 men were dark-skinned males.
Yep.
And this is something that you brought up earlier. Now, this would imply, now, of course, this is speculation. We both admit to this, that Ziad Jarrah never got on the plane.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think didn't happen. Like, he didn't get on the plane. Regarding the cockpit voice recorder, which is important because it was played once, and it was played for the victim's family during the Zacchaeus Moussaoui trial, in which there were 2 people in the cockpit, one guy outside the door who was wearing a bomb belt, something that you mentioned earlier. Regarding what was being said in the cockpit, there was a person sitting next to the pilot, and he was saying him by his name. You referenced it earlier, Saeed. Saeed up down the plane. Saeed up down. Well, there was a hijacker. His name was Saeed Al-Ghamdi. Why was he flying the plane? Okay. Now, this is important because this is an anomaly that's thrown away by people who are obviously people who are also, incidentally, people who blame Israel for the attacks of 9/11. Well, here you go. Now, here's a great leeway into suggesting that not only maybe Israel intelligence may have had foreknowledge, but here's where there's smoke, there's fire. Here's maybe a link into having an Israeli operative inside the Hamburg cell all the way from the start of inception, right? Now, I'm not saying, and you're not saying, that Ziad Jarrah is an Israeli operative. We don't have no evidence for this. But what we're saying is that his family, especially when you look in the background of some people that you mentioned earlier that were involved with Israeli operatives. Who am I talking about, Nelson?
Talking about his older cousin, Ali Jarrah, who was found to be a Mossad spy for 25 years. He had tipped off quite a few high-profile targets. There was also a younger cousin named Yusuf Al-Jar, who was also caught the same time as Ali Al-Jar. But Ali Al-Jar's his use for the Mossad was very, very beneficial. He targeted the assassination in 1995 of the Palestinian Jihad. Is it Palestinian Jihad or
Imad Mughniya, I think.
No, well, it's not Hezbollah yet, but the Palestinian.
Right.
What's his name?
Palestinian Jihad Organization, I think. PJO.
Yeah. It was in '95 in the island of Malta, ironically.
Right. That's right.
God, I forget what his name was, but he was an upcoming figure in that whole thing, But then when Ali Al-Jar, Ziad Jarrah's cousin, is caught, he'd already served as tipping off for the assassination of Imad Mughniya, one of the key founders of the Hezbollah. I mean, they even speculating that he was involved with 9/11 in the beginning. At least CNN tried to.
That's right.
But he was involved with some bombings that went on, but in Lebanon with the they say with the barracks bombing and other events. Well, he also did hijackings too.
Yeah.
But that was all in the early '80s, and he changed his ID. He changed his identity. He even went through plastic surgery. So yeah, it was a hard thing to find. And then he also tipped off. Ali Jarrah also tipped off the assassination for Assad's Syrian nuclear arms procurer Mohammed Suleiman, and that was also the same year. So that's how much there's there's a tie-in there of how useful of a Mossad spy or asset he was. But then there is the uncle of Ziad Jarrah. Assem Jarrah is his name. Actually, they found a business card of his in the Flight 93 debris. It's actually how I ended up researching about him, because I didn't know. I didn't watch the Hamburg Cell movie. I didn't know everything about But in the Hamburg Cell movie, his uncle's actually partially portrayed in there. But his uncle, aside that he already moved to Germany in 1982 or 83, being a medical, it's somewhere involved in the medical industry, or I'm not sure. I think it's pharmaceuticals. I don't think he is even a doctor. He went to learn to be a doctor, but he was there. But he served as a Stasi spy, and he was also serving for his Libyan intelligence at one point. But this is also before the wall came down, because the wall comes down in '88, so things change. There's no more Stasi, but he still ends up being a German intelligence asset even after that. But this whole point, he was even aside that he was working for Libyan intelligence, and then also Stasi. He was also spying for the Communist Party of Israel. And what he was assigned to doing, he was spying on college students, ones that mostly Libyan college students. Now, that's very much, you might as well be spying for the Mossad at that point. That's definitely going to let Israel is very tight. No intelligence gets out. You can't really get in there and cover any stories and criticizing Israel. It's just it is a Orwellian nightmare in that aspect. So to me, I would suggest that basically that there is a Mossad or Israeli handle on this guy already, just from that. But also the more interesting thing about him is that as an asset, and it says on his Stasi card, on his card, that he was also a member of the Abu Nidal organization. Now, that's a whole other story, and I'm just not going to get into that. But I do recommend readers to read the book by Patrick Seal called The Hired Gun. Isn't it The Hired Gun?
I think you're right. I'll actually look.
A Gun for Hire. Gun for Hire.
A Gun for Hire, that's right.
Yeah, Gun for Hire. If you want to know how important he is, read that book. That's all I'm going to say. Because you're missing a real big piece of history out of all of this. So yeah, you look at to Ziad al-Jar, there is quite a bit of, aside Israeli intelligence, a lot of Western intelligence ties in, and even going back to Ali al-Jar, the cousin, I believe he also had passports from different countries too, so he traveled quite a bit. These people spoke French, they speak French, Ziad Jar spoke like 4 languages.
Yes.
So there's even the potential of these people even working for French intelligence as well. I'm just putting that out there. You never know. So
they cross intersect these agencies.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So that's a really important part. That's a really huge thing that they're missing, especially with those who just want to look for Israeli or Jewish, links. We could get into Zacharias Basawi if we wanted
right, for
to,
sure.
But I'm not getting into
right.
that.
No, the thing, and the reason why I brought that up is because we are inundated with people in the truth movement who love to blame Israel for everything under the sun. But the irony is that in their position regarding no planes and no hijackers or no phone calls is that they throw away great evidence, especially just for 93 alone, showing that there might have been, Israeli intelligence that a mole could have been involved with the Hamburg cell right from the inception. Now, I wrote an article, and you've done many videos regarding about Ziad Jarrah, and how he grew up. He was a secularist. His family was well-to-do. He wasn't born, raised a religious person or a fanatic. And in my interview yesterday with Parallax Views, I actually brought up the notion that Ziad Jarrah actually was never brought up with religion at all. But when he moves to Germany, almost immediately he's involved with one of the most notorious mosques in all of Germany called Al-Quds. And it was headed by Mohammed Fazizi, who's an actual known Hamas supporter and actually one of the most blatant Wahhabi Salafi imams in the entire country. So he didn't have like this evolution. He almost like immediately goes right to the mosque and involves himself with fanatics right there. And of course, he's never seen by German intelligence with Muhammad Atta, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Marwan al-Shehi, they have, you know, the other members of the Hamburg. So Ziad Jarrah always lives alone. And he's always alone away, even inside the United States. He's never living with Atta. He's never living with Marwan al-Shehi. And there's only one video out there showing Ziad Jarrah Muhammad Atta, and that's with the video with no sound, when he sits with Muhammad Atta, and they're reading from a pamphlet, and it actually is
the video found at Tarmac Farms.
Yes, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And I think you know about this video because I think you spoke about it too. And unfortunately, you're like one of the very few people that bring it up, where they're shooting his video, Ziad Jarrah, and he's laughing in it. He can't even pose as a great, like as this stout religious martyr fanatic. Meanwhile, there's other video wills of other hijackers where they're dead serious. Ziad Jarrah came and played the part. So that's it. More than I'm just saying, just interestingly enough. But there are other anomalies I could bring up with September 11th with you. But we're coming up on 2 hours now. If for you personally, if you could recommend some books that for the listener to read, what books would you suggest?
Well, I'm gonna definitely always reference Michael Collins Piper's books, but I'm only gonna say when sticking to this subject, you only need 2. You need the Judas Goat, and also one of his other books, False Flag Template for Terror. I would recommend also reading even any of Peter Lance's books on 9/11. He's got 3 of them.
Yes.
1,000 Years of Revenge. God, I can't even think of the other one. The one with the Commission Report cover. And then the one about Ali Muhammad,
Triple Cross.
Triple Cross.
Right.
Yeah. I would recommend reading Mitchell Gray's book. I would recommend.
Right.
I would recommend looking at the official stuff, looking at some of the conspiracy stuff. But my God, there's hardly any good conspiracy stuff to read.
Yeah.
Barely. I've read even like. Who did I read? What's his name? God, with the Star and the Cross. Who wrote that?
Yes.
Wayne Madsen.
Wayne Madsen, right.
It's like Wayne. It's actually a good book, but he doesn't do it. Honestly, he doesn't do enough Saudi stuff, and the guy's still a Pentagon no planer.
That's what gets me. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't. God. I'm trying to think what else. There's quite. Look at the 93 bombing stuff. Look for any books, even basic books on the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Compare them all. There's small books on them. They all have they all have different details and different conclusions on some of them on some suspects.
Just to also add too. Who are the primary influences of your life going down this road regarding September 11th?
I'm going to say Piper. I had a lot of people before, but they all become misleaders. They're all
right.
They're all they all garbage. I had read a little bit of David Ray Griffin's book a long time ago. The guy's garbage. The guy believes things are fake phone calls. It's still nanothermite. It's just a focus on that. There's very few. This is why I want to write books.
It's unfortunate that we can't even come up with a handful of people.
No.
I
would just.
Right.
That's unfortunate. I just tell people don't necessarily just focus. Reading on 9/11. Read the books on OKC bombing. Read the books on the 93 bombing. Read about Iran Contra. What was going on then? There is something I will add. I forgot to mention about Bojinka Plot Bojinka Plot when it was discovered in the Philippines. The other thing not to forget going on, as it being the phase of 12 hijackings or 12 plane bombings and 12 hijackings, the idea was to really bring us 12 Pan Am 103s, because that was the big scare of terrorism back then.
Right.
Because people don't realize it because we were young. I know myself when that had happened. People were freaked out. Yeah, you're freaked out about some Arabs taking over your plane with a gun or knife or whatever. How about you're just, flying out of nowhere, thousands of feet in the sky, and then boom, you're, blown out and you're, falling to your death.
Right.
That's what happened at Pan Am 103. It was a horrible, horrible incident, especially, it happening in December of '88, 3 days before Christmas.
Right.
But point being is that, that's what the Bojinka Plot was to start to bring that, to turn that terror a dozen times into effect, And the reason why it's also, important to point that out, because according to CIA Terry McDermott, he interviewing people in the Philippines, he had noticed that KSM would bring his girls and they would party and they would celebrate the bombing of Pan Am 103. Huh? It's
Really?
like, why would they be doing that? Why
Sure.
would they be? That's supposed to be Libyan Airlines pilots that did it.
Right.
If you believe it.
Sure. You think he may have gotten the idea from Pan Am 103?
Maybe it's part of the same evolving network that really was involved.
Sure.
Loosely, even though we're talking 7-8 years already after the fact. It would definitely be an inspiration already, but maybe it's something mutating.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Nelson, I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'm going to let you have the last word. Where can people reach you and find your information?
Well, you can check my blog. I have a blog on WordPress called 9/11 Skeptics versus Truth. It's 9/11 Skeptics vs. Truth.
Right.
I've only got a few articles written there. I even got one hosted by, maybe even two by Adam hosted on there. Some of that stuff I may even try to work into a book, because some of them are very long articles. My main way, you can reach me through Twitter, Thermal Detonator, or DJ Thermal Detonator. You should be able to find me on there pretty quick. The other, the most traction I really get is mostly on YouTube with my YouTube channel, Truther TV. I also have a second channel called Truther Archives, but it's just mostly news clips and other people's other, professional, mainstream programs.
Okay. I think, oh, by the way, you think about writing a book, are you?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
still onto that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still, writing things, collecting things as they go, It's kind of easy when you're already kind of working on film scripts already, at least.
Sure.
I even get a bird's eye view of where I want to write a book anyways, too, of where I need to find information as well. So.
Well, you're more than qualified to write a book, and I would definitely be your first reader on it. So, Nelson, listen, thanks a ton for doing this interview. Thank you very much.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Darkened Hour.